So part of the problem with databases is that they are actually very primitive in security. They are limited in how they can link to central directories like Active Directory. They can often do authentication. So yes, your password can be managed, say, through LDAP or Active Directory. But what they don't do is link for authorization. So the whole point or the objective of many organizations is to have a central repository of who has access to what. That's usually done via Active Directory group membership or LDAP group membership. The problem is that unlike many other applications, databases do not honor this. SQL Server has some capability to do this, where you can do a direct group mapping where the group and the role are one and the same based on name. But that's not sufficient for many organizations because you may want to have multiple sets of roles, and one group may map to different roles, and another group maps to an overlapping set of roles. So having only one-to-one mapping doesn't work very well. It's also difficult to map or to join many databases to Kerberos domains. So say an Active Directory domain that you're managing for your organization for single sign-on into your applications, unless that domain is actually managed by your cloud provider, they generally won't allow a managed database to connect to it. All databases also have limited and varied audit capacity. Okay, each database will need to have audit configurations that are different, managed differently, managed by the DBAs, not by compliance officers. Okay, so this results in inconsistent behavior depending on what type of database you're dealing with. And the reality is compliance officers don't understand all this. Databases are complex. And this means that they leave it to the DBA in order to figure out what is actually going on and to ensure compliance. And the fact is, DBAs are their own special breed. They tend to have a lot of free reign because nobody else really understands what's going on with them and with the databases. So the reality is that in most cases, the databases are non-compliant. Okay, and that leaves a big regulatory hole for companies. Okay, even auditors don't pay much attention to this fact, and they should be. So the DBs and DBAs need to be brought into the regulatory fold. A proper solution should do a number of things. One, integrate with centralized user management, such as Active Directory. All users, including the DBAs, should have security enforced from a third party or an external source. Okay, this allows you to meet segregation of duty mandates. Second, as people log in, it should interact and work with the database itself to provide runtime enforcement of policies. Okay. Third, it should allow external users, basically the compliance officers, to edit the roles that are granted to users based on data categorization. So in this model, you would basically go through the database, say, this is a social security number, this is PII, this is GDPR sensitive data. Then, based on that categorization, the compliance officer can say, okay, HR needs to be able to see social security numbers. Other parts of the organization can see GDPR related data for analytics, whatever. Okay. But the point is, you need to categorize and then enforce and make that easy. Finally, and this is really critical, unless you can attest that everything is correct and complete, nothing really matters from a compliance perspective. So finally, you need to provide compliance reports on who has access to what, based on what group membership they have in the central directory and how it maps into the database itself. Now, let's talk about Heimdall and how it works in order to actually solve all these issues. First off, it provides just-in-time provisioning. So let's look down in the lower corner where you have the users. A user will connect to the central console, the Heimdall manager, as a database access portal. Now, this is in the case of interactive users, like say a data analyst or a super user. They will connect to the console, which will then use the information from Active Directory in order to determine what their credentials should be, what access they should have. They can request access to a particular privilege level, which includes privilege escalation with approval chains. Based on the result of that, a time-limited session will be configured on the database. They'll be given information that's necessary for them to connect to the database. They will then either be directed to our proxy for query logging or directly to the database. They can then log in, do what they need to do in the time frame that has been approved. They log out and then they can cancel their session. Net result is you now have privilege escalation with approval chains. That gives you segregation of duty and gives you audit trails of what they are doing. Okay. So here are all the benefits. Segregation of duty mandates met. Zero trust access to the database. The portal provides things like multi-factor authentication, which isn't something that is traditionally supported in databases themselves. It provides you with Kerberos authentication. But interestingly enough, in the case of managed databases, like say AWS Aurora, it means that you can do Kerberos integration without the database actually knowing about the domain or being configured for the domain. The proxy actually handles everything, creates ephemeral credentials as needed, and then uses them to connect to the database without the database being part of the domain. Just in time provisioning, privilege or principle of least privilege. You've got privilege escalation. So for example, your super users do not have to have super user access unless they actually need it. Because you can route everything through our proxy. The proxy sees every command that is executed, giving you a consistent audit trail no matter what type of database you're using. Multi-vendor compliance reports. We hide the complexities of how the databases are managed behind the scenes for role management. We simply tell you who has access to what, and that is sufficient for compliance officers. Simplified role management based on the type of data. Okay, there's no dependency on cloud-specific features here. So if you have databases across multiple clouds, this simplifies your job enormously. And overall, you get more secure data with minimal compliance overhead. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to come to our website at www.heimdalldata.com. Check out what we've got and let us know if you're interested. Have a good day.